Hey there, podcast listeners. Our guest today is Katie Smith, a social worker extraordinaire, and we get into some pretty deep subject matter out there. I think you guys are going to learn a little something by the end of this podcast, and I think you're going to look at the world a little differently at the end of this podcast. Also, Tucker and I share some very embarrassing elementary school bathroom stories, including how Tucker seems to have some kind of pent-up aggression towards a custodian from his elementary school. All of this and more on today's episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is! He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
I've consumed podcasts now for a long time, and I love podcasts. I love the fact that they're longer versions of conversations. You're not trying to squeeze things into like a 10-minute or less segment. And I also love the fact that podcasts can be made anywhere and consumed by anyone on the planet as long as you've got an internet connection. And I think the radio business is coming along to podcasts where they're buying up certain episodes so they've got content that they can play later. But there probably has never been this much audio creative content created in the history of man.
I would say, yeah, it probably gets bigger every year.
And it's easy, too. So first and foremost, folks, if you've ever thought about putting together a podcast, look no further than JJ Meets World, because we are two guys who have no business whatsoever putting on a podcast. And after Tucker did some Googling to figure out what equipment we should buy, it became a thing.
Yeah.
That's as simple as it is.
Yeah.
If you've got the time to buy a microphone, and if you've got the money to, the cheapest podcast mic you could probably buy is what, like $10?
No, probably.
Like a little USB one that you plug in?
I mean, a lot of people just do it on their phones. I mean, there are apps out there that you can, if you're like, oh, you know what, let's record a quick 10-minute podcast while we're on this bus trip, and pull your phone out and record you and your friends talking. Press a button and it's going to upload it right away. So, I mean, there are ways out there that you could do absolutely bare bones podcasting for probably free if you already have a smartphone.
Yeah. Side note, that idea is trademarked. It's JJ Meets World Bus Edition. And so don't steal our ideas for that. Tucker, when you were looking at this equipment, did you say to yourself, gosh, it is incredibly reasonable cost-wise to get a hold of these? We've got these fancy little gooseneck things that the microphones sit on, and they're clipped on, and the microphones are Audio Technica. Hey, I've got those headphones at work from that company.
So I'm going to have to kind of round it up in my head here a little bit, not counting the computer that we recorded on, which is an expensive computer. I think we probably dropped about $300 total on the equipment to get started, and that's for having 4 people talking on their own channels, but you don't have to spend that much money.
No.
I mean, you could definitely spend, way less than that. I definitely priced it out in a way where I found microphones that were probably the cheapest we could find that also gave us this level of quality. And yeah, if anyone out there is like, hey, I want to start a podcast, reach out to me and I'll send you some links of the stuff we're using.
Yeah. If you're in the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo area and you've always wanted to start a podcast, we'd even be more than happy to host you at our studio sometime.
Not Dilworth, though. You fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah, Glendon, you're okay.
Grandin, I don't want to hear from you.
Yeah,
I'm just
come
kidding.
on.
Love Grandin. Love Dilworth.
Shout out to Grandin, North Dakota, former home of Tucker and former home of my grandparents.
Yeah, I mean, I lived there up until from 85 till 89.
We should do a Grandin podcast.
I would love to do a Grandin podcast.
Called like Grandiosin.
I have some good memories from back then. Of course, I was a toddler, so they're very vague memories.
Yeah.
And they're probably wrong, but I have good memories from back in Grandin.
I remember Gardner, North Dakota, I think it was like the last Saturday of October, would have a bingo at their fire hall, like a bingo day. And so I remember the decorations were always the same. It was the same like witch decoration and the same ghost. And my grandmother would take me up there every year, and I had a ton of fun. They had a raffle, and one year I picked my grandma's name for a bottle of perfume, but it was to raise money for their local fire hall, and it was just a ton of fun. People love bingo. Have you ever noticed that?
Well, yeah, I mean, either you are hardcore into bingo or you just don't go. I don't think there's anyone that's like, yeah, I hit the bingo hall once a year, maybe, if I feel up to it. No. I mean, you're either there regularly. I went once. I was dating a girl who was really into bingo, so she took me along.
To like our local bingo parlor?
Yeah,
Big Top Bingo?
Big Top. And yeah, I mean, the people there, they are serious, you know?
Oh, yeah. They don't like it when kids come in.
No.
Or non-bingo enthusiasts and kind of fart around and don't take it as seriously, because they come and they've got all their lucky things, like their lucky troll dolls and their lucky daubers, and this is a blackout game, so I only use the purple glitter dauber when it's time.
I definitely live for that sound when someone yells out bingo and everyone else groans.
Oh!
I live for that sound. It's such a good sound.
And everyone's like, there's always that person at the table, hold your cards. You don't know. She's old. She doesn't even know what she's doing.
And then there's the embarrassment of someone who does jump the gun.
Yep.
And brings their card up, and then they're like, nope, you don't have one.
Yeah,
you're wrong.
Everyone celebrates your failure because they're like, yeah, okay, I-26, come on, I-26.
The holy grail for me is to see someone do that, get it wrong, sit down, the next number's called out, and then they actually get a bingo. So you get two groans with a laugh in between.
Yep. Those are good
Call
times.
that a bingo sandwich.
Or the time when they've called maybe like 8 numbers and somebody bingos, and they're like, are you full of it? Bullshit.
So second grade, I have an embarrassing bingo story.
Please tell.
Second grade, Mrs. Munn's class, Halloween. I'm wearing my Batman costume that Mama Luke has made for me.
As referenced in previous episodes.
It is awesome. It's got a big cape. It's styled sort of after the Michael Keaton Batman. She handmade it. It's awesome. And it's Halloween, so we're going to play games. And the first game Mrs. Munn has us playing is bingo. And I'm jazzed, right? This is the best day ever. I'm in school with my friends, but we're not doing classroom stuff. We're playing games, and we're in our Halloween costumes. And we all get our bingo cards. And they had these bingo cards where they actually had little red sleeves on top of each number.
Yep.
So you weren't marking it with a pen. You were just knocking the sleeve over. And Mrs. Munn, rolls the thing, and the first one is called, and I had it on my sheet. I can't remember what it was. Let's say it was B7. Or B7. And she goes, all right, B7. And I went, I've got it! And I raised my hand. You don't have to do that. You just mark it in bingo. And everyone laughed at me. Later that day, I went into the boys' room, and I vomited on my costume.
Because of that?
I wasn't wearing it. I was taking it off and putting it into a bag, and then I threw up into the bag.
Because of the bingo?
I just think I was probably amped up on sugar and everything else that was going on, so I'm trying to wash off my costume. And I remember Mr. Tullifson, the school janitor, coming in and didn't help me.
Whoa.
Yeah. But I think he had other things on his mind because he was a good guy and a good janitor. So I think, if anything, he just knew I was taking care of it. It was a bad day. It started great and ended bad.
I had a situation when I was in second grade where one of the boys slipped me a note that said, come to the bathroom. And I was like, oh, this is probably going to be interesting. And so I got a hall pass to go to the bathroom. And when I got there, he and another boy grabbed me, and they pulled me over to a urinal, and then they pulled my shoe up, and someone had stepped on a urinal and left a bit of a shoe print on it. And they were trying to identify if it was my shoe or not. Like, I needed to Captain Morgan my leg up to be able to pee into a urinal, and it didn't match. But I felt like the mafia had grabbed me because I stepped into the bathroom and these two guys grabbed me, and I still so it's been 26 years since that happened, and I still think about it when I walk into a bathroom from time to time.
I got yelled at by Mr. Tullifson in the next year in third grade because me and my friend Quentin thought it'd be funny to try to go into the girls' bathroom. And
it's the height of comedy.
It was. And we're just walking in the hallway, and one of us was like, hey, should we go in the girls' bathroom? Yeah, let's do it. And we started walking in, and right as we started walking in, Mr. Tullifson comes walking out because he had been cleaning it. And he stopped us, and he made us sit on this bench in the hallway. and I cried because I thought I was going to get DT for the first time.
Oh.
Didn't get DT. Got yelled at by Mr. Wild when we got back to the room, but Quentin was fine. He was kind of a hard kid, but I was a super soft, emotional, sensitive child.
These are the type of things that create you as a person and create your neuroses and the things that you carry with you your entire life.
Were you a sensitive child? I was a sensitive child.
Very sensitive.
Yeah.
Very sensitive. And this is a good segue into our guest today. Katie Smith is a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also the wife of Greg Carlson, who's been a guest several times on the podcast. And I
believe I diss Greg in a friendly, jovial manner by calling him her lesser half.
I believe you do.
I do, and I just want to say I don't believe that Greg is lesser as a human being. I just merely wanted to flip the whole better half thing that people say about your significant other.
Yeah, I wanted to figure out a way like her husband is instead of Greg's what. I always think it shows ownership of some kind, right?
Yeah, and we didn't invite her on because she's Greg's wife. We invited her on because she's Katie Smith and she's awesome.
Right. And she starts, first and foremost, the story that I have her tell at the very beginning of this podcast is going to grab you by the buttocks pretty quickly here, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Katie's very interesting. She's going to end up moving onto my block, I think. It's so far along that recently I was watching Silence of the Lambs, and I saw she and her children walking to get used to their new neighborhood. And I was going to run out and say something, except for it was that moment where Buffalo Bill tucks his weenus in. And I have a big front window, so I was like, maybe I shouldn't draw attention to this right now. But you guys are going to like this. I think you're going to have a blast, and I think it's going to open some eyes out there, and you're either going to say it's a good thing that they're having this conversation, or you're going to say, man, I learned something from this conversation.
I would just say we should be thankful that we have people in our society that choose to be social workers, that go, I'm going to take this thankless, painful job because I care about my fellow human beings and I want to help them.
Yeah.
No one's like, I do social work for the money.
Right.
No
one's talking about the famous social worker that they intend to be one day.
These are people who they're always meeting people on their worst day, They're helping people who are having trouble, and that's a really selfless thing to do. And that's just one of the many reasons why Katie Smith is da bomb diggity.
Preach, Tucker, preach. So, let's get into this thing. You guys are going to enjoy it. Our guest today is Katie Smith.
JJ Meets World.
Katie Smith, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First and foremost, my favorite story involving you involves a trip you had to Asia where you ate the heart of a snake and then its blood.
I did.
Could you please tell us about that right off the bat? This is called a capture moment.
Okay. That was so fun. Okay, so I was on it was a social work study abroad trip. And our tour, the guy who was helping us get around everywhere was just awesome. And he took us to like this little weird bar place with mostly just a bunch of businessmen in it. It was obviously not like on the beaten path. It was not a touristy place. And their specialty is serving snake. And so they bring live snakes out in a bag, like a mesh bag, and then you get to choose your snake, whichever one you would like to eat. So, you pick the snake, they pull it out. They say, this one, as it's, like wriggling toward me.
Yes, that one looks delicious. Yeah. I'll go with that one.
The best one. And then they cut its head off right there at the table. And then they string it vertically. So all the blood is pouring out into like some sort of a vodka type of liquor.
Do they squeeze it like to squeeze the blood out, or does it just all come out pretty
No squeezing
easily?
Necessary. Yeah. Ugh. No, it just drains straight out.
Okay.
Just drains straight out. And then they take the snake back, they blowtorch the scales off of it and prepare it in multiple different ways. While as we wait, we take shots of vodka snake blood to get ready to eat this snake. So, and then they brought out several courses. Like the first was, I think that snake happened to be pregnant, so it was like the eggs.
You killed a mommy snake.
That was the first thing. And then whoever actually, I didn't purchase the snake, whoever bought the snake, whichever person I was with, they took the heart out right away too, like when they were draining the blood, and then whoever bought the snake got the privilege of eating the beating heart.
Oh, still beating.
It was beating.
So
it was beating.
Is the idea that you're kind of absorbing the snake's essence and energy, and you're becoming strong like the snake?
It could be.
Okay.
It wasn't presented in that way, though.
I remember you saying too, is sort of everyone was like, "Well, why'd you do it?" And you're like, "Well, you don't find yourself in this country in this bar every day,
right? Why wouldn't you?
Right? You're gonna seize the day."
That's a better question. Why wouldn't you?
Well, I can think of a lot of reasons why I would not. But namely, I don't like snakes. I'm kind of like Harrison Ford in that way. Not Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford. Do you think back on that fondly?
When someone reminds me of it, yes, I do. But I don't think about it often.
Have you told your children about it?
I don't know. I don't know.
This would be a fun conversation to have, like on a car trip.
Yes, exactly. They might freak out. Or not.
I mean, they might think it's cool and be like, "Oh, we gotta eat a snake like mom."
It could be a discipline tactic where, for some reason, that day the kids aren't showing Katie enough respect. Greg can pull them aside and go, "Kids, listen, your mom once drank the blood of a snake.
Yeah.
You do not want to mess with this lady."
Oh, it doesn't work that way in our house.
No. We've had Katie's lesser half, Greg Carlson, on the show a couple of times before, which I can say that because Greg's one of my best friends. But what I can also say is that Katie is impressive in all the ways that Greg isn't. You know, Katie has served in the National Guard and has one of the toughest jobs in the world, which is a social worker. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast today.
So let's get into that. You were, what country was it that you were in? Do you remember?
That was Vietnam.
So you're in Vietnam on a social work exchange program of types.
Yes. So it replaced like one of those boring policy classes. So you could either go on a trip overseas or take policy. So I decided to do the fun overseas trip.
And the people who didn't get registered in advance are the ones who take the policy class.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. My dad has a great story about how he and all of his fraternity brothers at UND waited until the last day to sign up for a gym credit. And the only thing left was ballroom dancing. And the first day of class, they waited until the last minute to get there. And so all of the females had been paired off already. And so most of these fraternity guys had to pick another fraternity brother to dance with. And so my dad and his best friend, Jim Gunkelman, ended up getting like a C in ballroom dancing because both of them were trying to lead the whole.
Oh,
no, they could
both
touch.
won.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. These guys like spent the summers on dairy farms together, sharing the same bed. So it wasn't the touching. It was more along the lines of like, no,
I'm
to
in
the
charge.
left. Yeah.
Yeah.
So social work is a pretty interesting thing to be called for.
Yes.
Because I think that a lot of people see the heartache and the frustration in it, and it's a constant battle for better funding, and it's a constant battle for getting people to realize exactly what it is that you're doing and you're trying to accomplish, because so much goes on behind the scenes.
It is a very misunderstood profession. I'm just going to sound like a big old whiner, but I mean, I think people really don't have any clue what I do all day long. It's very confusing. Like, oh, you give out meal vouchers, you help people get rides places. Well, yeah, I mean, we do those things. We help filling out forms and bills and things like that. But really our primary job, what I see as the core of social work, is to help people do things for themselves. And there isn't always a solution. There just isn't. And so part of being a social worker is helping people accept that there maybe isn't a solution for their really awful problem, and then to help them cope with that and to deal with it. And then the other great thing that I love about social work is that we have the opportunity to see all these big old gaps and find a way to maybe close the gap.
I know a lot of the social workers I interact with are people who close the gap through, like, you want to find a loophole in something, you talk to someone who's involved in social work, because they're the ones who are able to find those loopholes and say like, okay, so listen, I've got this individual and he needs a job and we got to get him a new suit, but we really don't have something to get him this suit. But we did find out that there's this program going on at MSUM. So if we could get him signed up under this program to be a free student for a day, we can go get the suit. And it's like, it's amazing. It's like, if there were strings attached to photographs, it would look like a madman's office, with things being interconnected you never thought would be connected.
There are a ridiculous amount of resources that you could never know every resource ever. It's just not possible because there's, and then like you said, you have to kind of know like who to talk to, and this person has this resource, and things just pop up.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. And things just pop up that maybe weren't there before. So I went to this really, I've been thinking about it ever since I went. There is a new place in Fargo-Moorhead that is a harm reduction center. Have you guys heard of this?
No.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so progressive for Fargo. It's great. So basically, people who are addicted to drugs can go there. They can get needles. They can get like sharps containers, so they can carry it around with them and put their used needles in the sharps container. They can dispose of them at the harm reduction center. They can get like different colored cookers so that they don't mix them up with someone else. I mean, some people would think this is enabling drug using behavior, but I mean, if you look at it in the bigger picture, we are helping we are giving people a safe place to use, they don't use there, but they get the supplies that they need. And then they know that when they are in crisis and they want to stop, that's a place that they can go and talk to someone. And that person can say, hey, here are some resources. This is what you can do. This is your next step. You're ready to quit? Okay, we're going to help you. And it's so much more effective than telling people to stop using drugs. Because that doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
That's not the way addiction works. It's not someone who's got necessarily like a weak will or they're just too lazy or whatever. I mean, it's much deeper than that. And I'm sure no matter what the form of abuse that they're going through or whatever harm they're going through, it's because of something traumatic that has happened to them or in their lifetime. And if you think of a drug addict who feels like they have no recourse, they can't go talk to the cops about it because they're going to get arrested and then their life's going to be in a worse spot. And also to anyone who might say that an organization like that is enabling, someone who's addicted to drugs at that level, like they're going to do the drug no matter what.
Yeah.
And so you might as well help them avoid spreading, awful diseases amongst each other and things like that.
Or keep them out of the hospital, which are a huge cost to society. I mean, that alone, that organization keeps people out of the hospital. I wish I'm trying. Jan is her name, and I can't remember her last name, and I just should be ashamed for not knowing, because she has been she organized the recovery or the harm reduction center. And was talking about how they have like mobile units that go out and they will pick people up before the ambulance has to pick them up or before the police come and, find them a safe alternative other than the hospital or jail, which that is a huge cost savings to our community.
Do you think that people's conversation about addiction has changed drastically in the last 20, 10, 5 years? I know we're not all the way to where we need to be, but I think people are starting to realize that addiction is an illness, and it's just like you don't choose to have cancer, right?
Yeah.
And addiction can be something that you don't choose to be affected in your own life. And it used to be that, if you had someone in your family who was an alcoholic, that stayed in the shadows. That had to be a shameful secret versus saying like, my uncle is getting the help that he needs right now. And he's going through an interesting battle and journey on his own. Because the one thing that's different about, to me, between addiction and something like diabetes is everybody's addiction is different. It's like a fingerprint, whereas some people's, like, oh, you've got type 1 diabetes. Here's the medication that works for 95% of the people out there. I see things like Adam Martin and what he's doing with the F5 project and getting people to change their minds. And I just feel like we're getting to a point now where addiction and people who are working with social work institutions, it's becoming the norm, I guess is the wrong way to put it, but it's becoming something that people are going, oh, okay.
Maybe
it's not
less
some
stigmatized.
Secret. Yeah.
Less stigmatized, but still stigmatized.
So I just have to be clear. I am not an expert on addiction in any way. It is not an area that I know a lot about. And in my perception, the conversation around addiction hasn't really changed.
Oh, yeah?
For as long as I've been in social work, which has been about 10 or 12 years. And that's a short time, So I think it's still really stigmatized. I think there are a lot of different ways that a person can look at addiction, but I think we kind of always fall back into that model of AA and things like that. But I think there are a lot of other ways that are being looked at to approach addiction more as addiction is a disease of loneliness and of not having a community and not having a group of people that you can feel like you're a part of. And that's part of why, I don't know, just overall in general mental health, when we don't feel like we're part of something or part of a bigger community or we don't belong, we cope in all kinds of ways whether it's drugs or alcohol or, the multiple ways that you can cope, shopping, whatever. So
Gambling. That's a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really the things that we become addicted to are the things that give us that sort of rush of dopamine, that sort of hit. And so, maybe, people think in terms of addiction, they think of illegal substances, right?
Right.
And so it's easy for those people to go, well, those are lawbreakers, those are criminals. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to think about them. But they don't talk about someone who is addicted to food.
Or cheese. I mean, cheese especially.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah, it is. If I could, I would inject that into me.
I know.
I'm addicted to the Marvel movies.
Oh, yeah, they're really good too.
Distill those things down.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can numb yourself with media or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to shut off your brain and you're in the world. And so,
so what do you think is going to change that from a social worker's perspective?
Oh boy. I think it has to be a culture shift. I think it has to be a paradigm shift in how people think about, living their lives, really. I mean, we kind of, and I think about this for myself, like, yes, I go to work and I come home and then I go home and I want to be home and I don't really want to go out and I don't really want to talk to anyone and I kind of just isolate. But then when everybody does that, I don't know, it's like sort of, maybe we're missing, I haven't ever lived for an extended period of time in a different country. And that would be interesting because I think that there are places that are just seem more connected. Like the people are more connected. And I don't even think that like computers, media, Facebook, whatever disconnects us necessarily. How there's the whole thing about how that's making, we're all connected on the internet, but we're not connected in person. Like, I don't know, maybe, but I think it's bigger than that, and I don't really know how to explain it.
Certainly with the internet, there are also people who have been able to find communities there that they would have had zero access to without the internet.
Yeah.
So like we recently just recorded a podcast with Mikey Sunrum, who lived in a small town where he had no access to what he's obsessed with, which is Godzilla stuff. And now, as he grew up and got access to the internet, he was suddenly able to connect with people who could do that. So it's really easy to dismiss the internet as sort of an end to our social ability. But for a lot of people, it's the thing that gave you the social ability in the first place.
I think that it could be a double-edged sword. I don't know. Yeah.
Let's slightly change topics to the band Ween. That's not
Speaking of addiction.
It's not a hard choice. So you like the Ween?
I love the Ween.
Yeah.
Greg and I are going to a double show.
What?
That's fantastic.
At the, what is it called? In Minneapolis, the Palace Theater?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Yes. At the beginning of November. Super pumped.
So that'll be like your third and fourth times in about a year seeing them live. Because we went in St. Paul.
September of 2016.
Was that when we went to?
I think so.
I thought St. Paul was February of 2017. But I probably was totally
It
wrong.
was September, I'm sure, because my brother and sister came.
That's right. Okay. So you've gotten a lot of live Ween in then over the past short couple of years.
I saw them for the first time like in 1996 or probably 97 or 98 at the Minneapolis Zoo. And they were really great. And a group of my friends had gotten tickets before I did. And so myself and another friend, we were sitting not as close to them. And so they were sitting closer to the front and we were sitting closer to the back, and we could see all of what was happening. And one of the acquaintances that was with my group of friends ended up like squatting down and peeing in the bench, like on these stone benches. And then she took her underwear off and threw them up on stage. And I don't remember, Gene or Dean, whichever, he like sort of took a stick or whatever was on the stage and kind of like pulled up her underwear and like flicked them off stage. It was great. It was great.
That's a good way to like be introduced to a band, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And be like, well, this is really an experience. Yes. My limited knowledge of Ween comes from the
movie Biodome?
No,
that's Tenacious D. What am I saying?
Yeah.
I love Tenacious D too.
From the
Pat. It's Pat.
It's Pat. I was trying to think of a nice way of saying the piece of garbage movie. It's Pat.
The Saturday Night Live Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen It's Pat?
No.
I guess because you never find out if Pat's a male or female.
Yeah. Right.
She's it's androgynous. That's the whole point of the Pat.
Yes.
They ask Pat to join them on concert or like on stage for a concert, and Pat plays the tuba. And
with Ween.
With Ween.
Oh, that's
with Ween.
awesome.
Yeah,
Big picture of the Boognish behind them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So it's
you just need to listen to the whole Mollusk album probably 7 times in a row.
Oh yeah.
And then you're going to be a huge fan. You're going to love it all.
I know people enjoy them. I mean, Tucker's got 3 T-shirts. One of them is a Ween shirt, and another one's a Ween shirt.
You just described 2 T-shirts, which is what I actually have.
No, because yesterday you wore one that had the cover of a comic book on it, and those are your 3 T-shirts.
Oh, I thought you said I had 3 Ween T-shirts.
No, you've got 3 T-shirts. 2 of them are Ween. One of them is not. There's one non-Ween related shirt that you wear, but I assume you're wearing Ween underpants on those days.
No, but I'd love to have Ween underpants.
Do they make Ween underpants?
If they don't, they should. And I know right where they should put the Boognish, on the brown. That's where it should go.
Because they like to paint the town brown.
They like to paint the town brown and make some brown sound.
Your husband is a gentleman who has really opened the doors of pop culture to hundreds of kids around this area through Trollwood and then teaching at the universities. So here's a question. What's it like to be married to somebody who is that entrenched in pop culture that people look to him sort of as a Sherpa?
It's convenient. It's very convenient because like we'll be in a group and someone will say, "Oh, when was that movie made?" And I can either text him if he's not with me, or I mean, he's like my Google. He's my own personal Google. Otherwise, I just kind of ignore it because it becomes too much.
Did you ever show like any signs of like, oh, I enjoyed this movie, and then he went overboard with like Gregging it by being like, okay, I know everything about this movie, and so like here's something we can share together?
No, because I like really bad movies like Dream a Little Dream.
Oh no.
The Corys.
I've got that on DVD.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. License to Drive too?
Yes, all of the Corey movies. Dirty Dancing, like all of these movies that like when I was, I don't know, 10 to 16-ish. Mm-hmm. And then I like to watch movies, but I wasn't really, I wasn't always going to movies. So I have seen so few movies compared to him. And I knew nothing about Star Wars. I mean, really, I saw, because when did the one with the Ewoks come out?
80-something.
80-something. So I was like 6-ish, I think. And so I went to that one. And so I remember it from that. But then when we had kids, I mean, I know everything about Star Wars. I know everything. Everything.
Because your kids happen to be into it?
Yes.
It's much better than if like they're into Paw Patrol or something, right?
It's way more fun than Paw Patrol. I mean, I even know who Admiral Ackbar is. I know who that is. I know what that character looks like.
I think that's the title of this podcast. I know who Admiral Ackbar is.
I think it was the University of Mississippi was looking for a new mascot, and they allowed their student body to pick the new mascot, and somebody suggested Admiral Ackbar, and it got a huge response, so much so that when they had the open voting for it, it was like 94% Admiral Ackbar.
That is amazing.
And so much so that I think Lucasfilm had even written being like, hey, we think this is a great idea. We'll totally license.
Oh, my God.
And then the university was like, that's funny. And we know that this was a democratic process, but there's no way a giant fish man is going to be the mascot for our college.
Oh.
And so the students kind of rebelled,
Yeah.
sort of like they did in Return of the Jedi.
That reminds me
That's
of
fitting.
a similar story where I don't know what city it was, but they had a new sewage treatment plant, and they had a similar thing where the citizens could vote. They could submit suggestions, and then the winning one was supposedly going to get the title. And the winning suggestion was the Fred Durst Center for the Music and the Arts,
No.
and it won. And so they had to nix that. And I don't know why people put these public things out. There was a boat that people
Bodie
voted,
McBoaterson.
Bodie McBoatface or something like that.
Nice.
You know, I love it.
And you know what? Here's the thing. If you're going to open that up to the people, you have to understand that it's going to be some smarmy person.
Yeah.
And it's going to be amazing. And you're going to
Yeah.
end up on the cover of USA Today with Bodie McBoatface.
Which
Yeah.
is why on this podcast right now we are announcing that we're going to hold a competition for JJ's first child right into the podcast.
Are you having a child?
The winning
Eventually.
Eventually.
There's
not
nothing,
right now.
Yeah, nothing
Or in the next
planned.
9 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Who knows? But it's going to happen in the near future.
Yeah. So I get married coming up here at the time of this recording, like in a month and a half. And part of the problem is that I've made her wait for 12 years to get married. So she's told me
Smooth.
that, hey, just so you know, we don't have this like honeymoon phase where we'll, like be married for a couple of years. She goes, I'm going to get pregnant right away. And then I'm going to get pregnant again. And I'm going to get pregnant again so that we can have all 3 kids and they'll be handled and they'll be taken care of because we're already late to the game. She was showing me a chart that she had made where she said, listen, if our kids have babies when they're in their mid-20s and like we're going to be like this old by the time we have grandkids and we won't even be able to enjoy them. I said, this is too much for me. This is freaking me out. I need to go.
Yeah.
I need to go have a Haagen-Dazs. Okay, I'm getting talk about needing to self-soothe there.
There's
like, that's
nothing
what I
worse
do.
than old parents.
Is that true?
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
was going to say nothing.
I was going to be. I
No,
was
there's
so
a lot
worried.
of things worse than old parents.
I always think the nice thing is I won't have to help anyone move into a dorm. That's the one thing. Is that by that point I'll be so broken and old.
Oh, I'm like, well,
that
what
I'll
do
be
you
like,
mean?
I won't have to. I'll
You'll be
like
swimming in all that podcast money at that point.
sweet,
that
sweet.
You'll just be able to pay members.
podcast money. By the way, this podcast is brought to you by your potential business. Back to the content. So, okay, so
Can I-
we've covered that. Yeah, you got something.
I do because I can't stop thinking about it. And Ween made me think of it because Greg really wanted to see Ween at Red Rocks. And it just didn't work out for this summer. And I just was in Colorado visiting my sister and we saw Shaky Graves at Red Rocks. Have you guys heard of Shaky Graves?
Yeah.
I'm obsessed. And he doesn't know it, but he's my new boyfriend.
Ooh.
And he is so good.
We're really in an
Shaky
age.
Graves, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Katie
You
Smith.
heard it.
Yep.
We're in an age where there's some really great up and coming musicians and bands and groups. Nathaniel Hawthorne and the Night Sweats,
Ooh, yeah.
easily one of the best live shows I have seen in a long time. It
I
reminded
think
me
it's
of
Nathaniel Radcliffe.
Oh yeah,
No, Ratecliffe.
Ratecliffe. That's it.
Ratecliffe, because I keep
Nathaniel
calling him
Hawthorne. He's
I
the one
keep-
who wrote.
I thought you said Daniel Radcliffe. And I
I
was
keep
like, Harry
calling him
Potter?
Daniel Radcliffe.
No.
And the Night Sweats, even though I know it's Nathaniel Rateliff.
Yeah,
but-
Nathaniel
'cause it's
Hawthorne
fun.
is an American author, and he wrote like some famous. Can't think of what it is, but like Johnny Tremaine or something like that. Anyway,
That
But
was a
yeah,
good show. I was
It's
there.
it was
At
an
Blue
amazing
Stem, it was
show,
so good.
right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she's left us. But Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings is another group who I caught at the last year of 10K. that I really got into. And so I love that there's still bands who are touring that I love, but I'm really starting to like some of these new groups that I had never heard before.
I heard a statistic once that I don't know where I heard it. It's probably garbage, but after you're 30, your music tastes sort of like you just kind of stick with everything you've listened to from 30 and prior. And I don't want to be that.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if for the majority of people that's true.
Yeah.
Because it seems, most people that I meet don't have the same curiosity for art like that. But I think both you and Greg and JJ and I and most people we know do have that. And plus, because Greg is consuming so much new media all the time, he's bringing all this stuff home. So you wouldn't be able to help but listen to new stuff from time to time.
And it's handy. I like that.
Yeah.
My problem is they're not making any more Animaniacs albums. And so since they're not making any more, I've got to find new stuff instead.
Like the cartoon?
Yeah.
Like the cartoon.
If your kids haven't heard it, they would love it because there's a song where they say butt.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's also a song called Lake Titicaca that is really just wonderful.
But it's also educational because they have the planets,
They've got the planets. They've got every country, which is outdated at this point, unfortunately. Yeah. I know all the U.S. states and their capitals because of it. To Turkey, Australia, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Indianapolis, Indiana, and Columbia is the capital of Ohio. There's Montgomery, Alabama, south of Helena, Montana. Then there's Denver, Colorado, and Boise, Idaho.
That would have been so good last year for Forrest.
Did he have a test?
Yeah, it was the 4th grade. I think in 4th grade you learn all the states and capitals.
I think you're right. Yep.
I didn't. I was left behind.
Yeah.
Not in grades, but like just in general education. I don't ever remember having to learn the states and the capitals, which is unfortunate.
Oh, there's so many things I didn't learn. Now I know because my children are in school and I'm helping them with their homework. And I'm like, I don't know how to add this fraction.
Yeah. We all grew up in educational systems that didn't see the internet coming. And so we had to memorize all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then now we don't have to.
No.
You know what I think is the biggest jerk around that they're doing to kids are multiplication tables. I never understood that because what was a math teacher's number one thing? You're not going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket and be like, oh, yeah, Mr. Duro, I certainly do.
Thanks a lot,
some
Mrs.
people
Carlson.
have 2 of them.
Yeah, long division was where I started to hate math, which was in the 4th grade.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We used to have a thing set up where they looked like race cars, and the better you did on your test, the further your race car went along. And I remember
that would be so shameful for me because my race car would be like way at the back.
The kids who got it right got a checkered flag, and so I remember being like, there's only 2 kids left who don't have checkered flags, and I'm one of them.
So 3rd grade at Horseman was when we learned multiplication and division, and then 4th grade was when long division came in. So we did timed multiplication tests, right? So you would start with the times 2s and then the times 3s and the times 4s. And once I'd gotten up to like the 6 or 7 range, I was struggling. Mm-hmm. And at the end of every week, the whole class would take it. And if you passed that one, you would move on to the next one. But I was stuck for a couple of week or 2. And then I remember my teacher, Mr. Wild, handing out the tests, and he go, all right, guys, we're going to start, and Tucker, you got this, in front of the whole class. And I was like, oh, no. And so I'm going as fast as I can, and the kid behind me was like, come on, Tucker.
Aww.
And I did it. I succeeded.
Good job.
But I hate math.
You had support.
I had support.
Yeah.
Do they have anything like when I was a kid, they had Book It?
Oh, yeah.
Pizza Hut.
Yeah, and they still have it.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, I don't know how it works. But actually, Greg and I just had this conversation about Book It. And he said, yeah, they still have it. So I learned that from Greg. I didn't really know.
Oh,
but
really?
We had just talked about it. So
you didn't come from an educational environment that used the Book It program and Pizza Hut?
We did. I did. Yes.
You just never participated?
I participated, but my kids could participate, but we don't. That's what I'm saying.
Why not?
It's currently, I don't know. It seems like a lot of work.
But they get a free personal pan pizza.
I am a lazy parent.
They 3 Boxcar Children books and boom, Pepperoni City.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Do you at least take them to Chuck E. Cheese with their report cards where they can get tokens?
No. Oh.
It's not a thing?
Trust me, the Carlson Smith kids have plenty of fun as it is.
Oh, my gosh.
They do.
They are so spoiled. It's ridiculous.
There was a thing where there was some town where their farmers market was giving away free vegetables to kids who brought their report cards in, and like 2 kids showed up.
Yeah.
All the other kids were like, there's an arcade down the street that's giving us tokens so we can
Way
play
more fun.
Tekken. What's it like being a parent? Is that fun or what?
Or what? Yeah, no, it's great now because they're 8 and 10.
Now.
They can wipe their own butts. They can get in the car themselves. They can buckle themselves in. They can go home from school and be okay for a couple hours. They can make themselves a bowl of cereal. They can entertain themselves without me. And it is fantastic.
I don't do like 4 of those things. So I'm a little worried right now.
I'm scared to ask you which 4 of those things they
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you.
Okay,
it would
good.
be shameful. I don't need to relive my multiplication tables. My worry about becoming a parent is that I can barely take care of myself on a day-to-day basis.
The beauty of being a parent is that you don't even think about taking care of yourself anymore. And all of a sudden you're taking care of everything. And then all of a sudden your kids are pushing you to do these things that you would never consider or even think about doing. And you're like, I never thought that I would be like, I never thought that I could do this or that I could accomplish this, or, like they'll, I can't think of a good example, but they'll want to do something and I'll be like, oh, rollerblading. That was a bad experience because I broke my wrist. But Violet said, I want to rollerblade. And I said, okay, we'll go get rollerblades. And I thought, well, I'm going to get them too. And I thought I would have never have bought these rollerblades and broken my wrist if I hadn't had a child.
So
An experience.
An
right?
experience. Like, yes, they push me out of my comfort zone.
I'm surprised rollerblading would have been pretty popular in your youth. Why
Well,
didn't you get into that?
I lived in the country. You don't rollerblade on gravel.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
My fiance Jill, she grew up in the country too, and so she didn't know things like rollerblading.
Yeah.
But she did know what it's like to skin your knee on a regular basis because they would be bike riding and biff it big
Yes,
time
that
on
does
the gravel.
happen.
So I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that your childhood is ripped from you in that way
Disappointing.
and giving you things like, oh, I don't know, giant skies full of stars at night or being chased by wild animals.
It was horrible.
Katie, does being a parent help in any way with being a social worker or vice versa? Are there lessons learned from one thing that have helped you be better at the other?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
And I think that absolutely. I think part of being a social worker is just knowing kind of intuitively, like having some experience in life makes you a better social worker. So not that young social workers aren't good social workers, but they are. But then that layer of experience kind of helps you be more calm with the whole job. Because social work can be really stressful. Because I think what I see in younger social workers, or maybe social workers who don't have kids, I don't know, this is all wrong. Just the more experience in life that you have, the less freaked out you get about not being able to fix problems because you know that problems can't be fixed. And I think I said this at the beginning of the podcast. That's kind of the art of social work is recognizing when there's nothing to be done and it's okay. And then doing something with that information. And so I think as a parent, it kind of helps to move you along that path and understanding like, okay, this can't be fixed and that's okay. Like that's okay. And we're going to deal with it and we're going to figure out how we're going to deal with it because it's not fixable.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Do you think that being a social worker gives you sort of, can you recognize things in the community that other people wouldn't necessarily see? For example, Jason Jacobson, a previous guest on here, it drives him nuts to walk into a coffee shop and to see posters for upcoming events. He's like, oh my God, they used 4 different kinds of fonts on this poster. I would
'Cause
never
he's in marketing.
recognize
Yes.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
but he's in that field, so he is trained to look at that in a way. Do you find like yourself noticing things that maybe, I wouldn't notice driving around town or interacting in businesses?
Yeah, I do. Like if I'm downtown at night, I feel like, there is a small homeless population. I don't think it's very big in Fargo. And I think a lot of the homeless population are mostly housed, or if they're not, they, some people choose to live homeless. There are a lot of resources, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so, I think if someone's not familiar with that population of people, they might be maybe scared of them, or, kind of see them as a threat. Maybe they're dangerous, but I guess I don't really see it that way, because we see them, in the hospital. They come to the emergency room, and you really see what their problems are. Like, they really have problems. They're not scary people. They have addiction issues or mental health issues or whatever issues that are keeping them from being able to maintain housing or get a job or have healthy relationships. And so, yes, to answer your question, I do think I see things a little differently.
Which is good, because if there were more people who saw things with a different bend on it, this would probably be a better world just in general. Not just social work things, but all things in general.
Or even so also just kind of, social workers, we study mental health. We learn the DSM-5. We kind of know like all of the diagnoses and things like that. And so sometimes when I'm interacting with someone and it's just always uncomfortable, and I think, God, this is just, am I doing something wrong? And you feel like maybe like this person is, gaslighting is a hot term right now. It's easier to recognize like, oh, maybe they have a personality disorder. Like maybe this, I also don't think that you should diagnose everyone with something, I think we overdiagnose, but I could go on and on about that too.
Pretty tough to basically then do your best to approach every situation individually, to not, like you just said, diagnose someone as this because you just diagnosed someone over here as this, right?
Yeah.
Like going, yes, I have all this training, but this is still a new individual I've never met before, and I need to find out what this person needs that might not correspond exactly to a textbook.
Right. So it doesn't matter what diagnosis they have, because the goal is to help them to resolve whatever issue it is, or to cope with whatever they're dealing with. So, if you have ADHD, that's fine. That helps everybody understand the problem, but that we still have to deal with the problem. Like having the diagnosis doesn't help you deal with the problem. I see, again, not an area that I'm an expert in, so I don't want to claim that I am, but I think diagnosis is important for billing purposes and for getting services. And then otherwise, I think it's sort of like you don't want to slap a label on everybody. It's kind of, that also kind of goes both ways.
I have the great pleasure of working with a lot of law enforcement agencies doing crisis intervention training.
Oh, yeah.
Where I act in scenarios where I'm suffering from bipolar disorder or I have schizophrenia, and the police are not told the symptoms I'm supposed to be portraying. They're just supposed to identify this person's in a state of mental crisis, and how can I build rapport? And it's about taking time. So it's not a cuff them and stuff them. It's you might be with this person for an hour and a half before they even trust you to say their name, and building that rapport. I'm very proud of Fargo because Chief Todd is trying to get everybody in Fargo through this system. And they wear a little CIT pin on their uniform if they've been through the training. And those are the individuals they call in for, some welfare checks. Or if, the person who had scaled the Island Park fence and was going to jump off of it. They called in Officer Todd Wall, who is just an absolute pro. He's the guy we go to ask all of these things. And you talk about like the DSM-5, right? So that is a rather weighty book.
Yeah.
It's huge, and it's the fifth edition of it. And so things are changing all the time. And so is that difficult in social work to know that things are changing everything's fluid in that way?
Well, no, it's not really, because the DSM-5 I see is a really political book. I mean, it's people with opinions who are writing these things down. And of course there's evidence-based stuff, but it's also, it's like a history book. There's the author is obviously swaying what slant the book has. So, it's a group of people who revise and write the DSM, and when it comes right down to it, for social work, the diagnosis doesn't really matter. What matters is, like you said, building rapport, gaining someone's trust. And once you do that, you can really help them change. So their diagnosis doesn't really matter. What we're trying to do is build trust. And it's like what you said, taking the time. I have been on call and gone into the emergency room and sat with someone for 2 hours, just listening mostly. I mean, it's just a matter of listening and validating and reframing. And, at the end of that interaction, that person was like, okay, I feel a lot better. I'm going to go home. I said, will you come back tomorrow and see someone in mental health and, maybe see a counselor? And he said, oh, yeah, okay. It was just that matter of just taking that time, and he didn't have to be admitted to the hospital, and he felt better, and he went home. So I think overall, when you're talking about what social work is, it's about building relationships, building rapport, building trust, and kind of knowing those skills to help people move forward.
Is it fair to say that in the social worker's toolkit that empathy and patience would be some of the most important, or what would be a quality that you think would rank even more important than those in your quote unquote toolkit?
I think those are very important, but I also think that not judging might be the most important thing.
Okay.
Because we all have our biases and opinions, and you can't help that. I mean, there's nothing that you can do to stop from being biased about whatever it might be, because maybe you had a bad experience in some way with something, and you meet someone and they trigger it, and you're like, I can't work with this person. I can't not judge them. So I think in those cases, you need to step away and let someone else take the case, or just do your best to recognize, like, no, this is my problem, not their problem. And I honestly, I think that most of the world, most of how we interact with people is, we're central. We always put ourselves central to every interaction. Every person does. Mm-hmm. So that it's almost in your own way a benefit, because you're the one who's spending the most, you're thinking the most about yourself, while at the same time you're thinking the most about yourself, and you're thinking the most about yourself. So I'm not sure where this is going, but
probably Ween.
Yeah, it's going back to Ween.
All roads lead back to Ween. But no, I mean,
they do.
I know what you're saying, though. It's that we all have this initial reflex to think inwardly.
Yes.
And that as a social worker, you need to find ways to work around that human reflex.
Yes.
Right?
You have to step outside of yourself, and sometimes you have to try really hard to do that.
Do you think that for the most part, you need, like, a good social worker has a few years under their belt? Like, you actually need to be in there, and you need to see some of this firsthand, and you need to interact with it before you really start to get a handle on what it means to be a social worker? Or do people come out of the gate and immediately are pros?
I think it can be both. I mean, I have seen, like, students who come through our program and, like, as green could be, and by the end you're like, oh my God, they were amazing. Like, they did such a good job, and you can just see it, like, that social work brain, and there's something about it. And I don't know if I could describe to you what a social work brain is necessarily. You just have to see it. So I think people naturally have it, and I think at the same time, Some people really need to practice to be good at it.
I can understand that. I
Yeah.
can definitely understand that. And social work brain is an interesting thing because is it hard to turn off your social work brain? Like, is it difficult to leave your job at the end of the day and say like, okay, now I'm going to go home and I'm going to just be Katie now for a little bit?
It was at first, but I'm pretty good at that now. Yeah, I still think like a social worker when I'm at home, but I don't bring my work home with me. I don't think about it when I'm at home. Well, depends, but usually I don't anymore.
But you use those skills like on your children.
Oh,
you're like, oh yeah,
I can't wait until they're like, Mom, stop social working me, because it's going to happen because I do it.
I think so. We had talked a little bit about how like technology, some people think technology has made people more isolated from one another in some ways. But I think that when I think of technology, I think of the biggest problem is that people don't know how to leave work. They don't know how to leave situations anymore.
Yes.
And you're just constantly trailing behind you the last thing you interacted with or the last conversation you had or, work. I recently took my work email off of my phone. And I let everyone know that they can only get a hold of me via email the same way that they would if my phone that's on my desk. And
that's called good boundaries.
It is, but you know what? I feel like I'm a second-rate citizen in my office now because I'm not pulling my weight. I'm not doing the job that I'm supposed to do. And I think that's going to be the next big thing for our culture is realizing that boundaries are not a dirty word.
Yeah.
They are something people need to be able to live full lives.
Well, and I'm a supervisor in my job, and one of the things that I think is so important, and I kind of get irritated with the people that I supervise sometimes if they stay late or if they, are getting too involved, because I think it's boundaries. If you can't stay late, you have a life and you're going to burn out. You're going to be like this shooting star, just burn into a crisp, and it's such a risk. So
I've actually thought about, and I've been kind of moving towards this, is actually carving out times of my day where I leave my phone in the other room silent and I don't look at it. And I mean, obviously I would still be checking it throughout the day, but I'm constantly just looking at that thing. And anyone can get a hold of me at any time. And that's often not very helpful, because if I'm doing something like I have to edit something together, I need to take a couple hours to do it, and suddenly I'm getting texts from a family member or something, just completely derails me. And I think we're all kind of dealing with the psychological baggage of being connected constantly.
Because if you're not, I mean, you're expected to be. It's like, why wouldn't you? Your phone is in your pocket. I know it's in your pocket. Why wouldn't you answer it?
Yeah.
I think, what amazes me is someone listening to this right now goes like, well, duh, you don't take your work home with you, and you can't be contactable 24/7. But they're listening to this podcast most likely on their mobile device that they've probably checked once because somebody texted them during this thing. And it's so easy for us to say and to identify like, yeah, that's a horrible thing. We shouldn't do that. But we're not actually doing anything to remedy that problem. Do you monitor screen time with your kids?
Yeah, we do. In the summer, it was no iPad after noon or something like that. I don't know. I wasn't home on the weekdays, so that was Greg's problem.
Greg's got summers off because he's a teacher.
Yep, lucky guy. But I mean, we try to keep them from watching TV all the time. They mostly watch, right now they're watching the animated Ghostbusters series.
The real Ghostbusters?
Yeah.
Nice.
But I can't tell you.
By the way, that's got one of the most terrifying things I ever saw as a child in it, which is the Boogeyman episode where Egon is terrified of the Boogeyman. And the voice that Frank Welker does for the Boogeyman is, it's still to this day, that and Gremlins freak me out.
Yeah.
Like there's no tomorrow. So hopefully your children don't get nightmares. Keep going.
They do. Forrest has nightmares related to robots, and I don't think there are any robots in the Ghostbusters, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they watch maybe like an hour of TV after school, and then we read. Usually we've been reading Harry Potter, like all as a family.
Nice.
Family Harry Potter.
Awesome.
And And then after that, they don't get to watch TV for the rest of the night. So they get to watch it after they get home from school.
I'm listening to Harry Potter on Audible right now.
Oh, yeah.
I read all the books as they came out when it was way more acceptable than it is right now to see like a 35-year-old man reading Harry Potter and like
so
starting
good.
to cry during it.
I think it's perfectly acceptable, JJ.
You think so?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, then tell me why I got kicked out of the Village Inn, Tucker. But
Because you're only supposed to get one piece of pie.
it says Free Pie Wednesday. Pie is a plural. So when I'm listening to it on Audible, it's done by Pottermore, which is her online, it's where she creates even new stuff for the Harry Potter trilogy. But they picked a guy who does British radio plays. And so he does a voice for every different character. It is amazing. It has opened my eyes to an entirely new way of consuming Harry Potter.
You guys should come over and listen to Greg read Harry Potter because he also does different voices for every character.
Really?
And
That is awesome.
I really do look forward to it every night.
What book
His
are you on?
Hagrid is amazing.
Is it? So
It's
this
so
guy's
good.
Hagrid is very good. I like it.
And
Next
his Snape, his Snape is perfect.
next time I have lunch with Greg, I'm like, do your Hagrid right now.
Yep.
I want to hear your Snape right now. I want to hear your Professor McGonagall right now.
Could you please record a voicemail greeting as Albus Dumbledore for me? I love that Harry Potter can cross generations. Like you don't need to be a kid to enjoy Harry
No,
Potter.
I had never read it before. And so this summer was the first time I've ever read it. And I can't stop. I'm in a book club and I keep not reading the book because I can't stop reading Harry
Screw
Potter.
Angela's ashes, you guys. You've got to read Goblet of Fire.
What are you supposed to be reading right now in your book
I
club?
can't remember.
Oh.
But I'm sure I have some time before I have to. Usually I read them 3 days beforehand.
Got it.
Or you just speed
Yeah.
through and be like, okay, yeah, I get what's going on in this chapter. Here we go.
I'm currently rereading an X-Men novelization trilogy I read in the 6th grade.
Oh.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I rarely will go back and reread books. Do you ever reread a book that you've read before?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the books that you reread that you've done?
I love the book Roots.
Ooh.
Really?
Yeah. It's really interesting to me. I like that
Yeah?
part of history. And then I love Clan of the Cave Bear, the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Nice.
Mhm. We had the VHS tape of Clan of the
Oh,
Cave Bear.
it's so bad.
Yeah, and I remember as a kid being like, "Why do we have all the books of this? This sucks." So I've read. There are a couple books that are actually almost all of them are nonfiction that I've read. There's a book called Guru: My Days with Del Close, which is the last 2 years of Del Close's life. Now, who's Del Close? I'll tell you. He's the guy who pretty much invented modern day improv the way we know it.
Oh.
Bill Murray, Mike Myers, Chris Farley, all of these guys revered Del as this comedy god. And if you've ever seen the movie The Untouchables, he's the alderman who tries to bribe Elliot Ness. No reaction from either of you.
Nothing.
Anyway, so the book is amazing because it's about his stories from his life. And like one of his great stories is he was out at this rare book auction when he was in his early 20s. And he was bidding on this L. Ron Hubbard book. And he's bidding back and forth on this book. And he wants to get it really bad. And the gentleman who ends up outbidding him, I'm not going to tell you what he goes on to invent, but Del gives him the idea to oh, you know what you should do is just turn this into a religion instead of a self-help thing. You're going to love it. It's amazing. So Guru, but I've also read a book called Candy Girl, maybe 5 times, and it's written by Diablo Cody, who wrote the movie Juno.
Oh.
And it's about, she was a stripper for 3 years, and it was about her life as this underground stripper in Minneapolis. And I love it because of Minneapolis, and she talks about places I went to all the time, like the Uptown Diner and getting the catfish breakfast. And I was like, oh my God, I got it. Maybe I was there the same time she was. But it's very, very interesting. And she does a great job nailing Upper Midwest. She is so good at just, the same way the Coen brothers obviously are, finding those sentimental things to us that are just stupid, silly, wacky, goofy things to other people. She talks about Lutefisk,
Yeah.
which I don't think is so bad. I'm gonna
It's
throw that out
terrible.
there. What?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm.
Maybe you're just not getting good lutefisk.
Probably not.
Is there such
Yeah.
a thing?
Is good and bad lutefisk?
Yeah, is it like well, we use the really good lie.
Well, sometimes it's how it's served, right? So like
I've never had, so I would
we
never
eat it
know.
on buttered saltine crackers. So maybe I really just love the salt and the butter.
Yeah.
And then it's a fish you
Those
gotta
are
like
powerful
get
tastes.
through.
Yes.
For me, it's The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis, which is part of the Chronicles of Narnia. It's actually, I read them in chronological order, which is not publishing order, but there are two orders, basically the order that he wrote and published them, and then an order that actually places them in their timeline in correct sequence, which is how I read it. So that would actually make it the first book, but it actually was printed sixth, and it's the story of how Narnia is created and how where the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe even comes from, and what happens before that, and where does Aslan come from, and all that kind of stuff. And I love it because it's about these two basically orphan kids, a boy and a girl. They're not orphan kids, but one of them lives with his eccentric uncle, who is the magician. And they're able to basically find that his uncle has been working with these different colored rings, and if you wear one ring, it transports you to this place called the World Between the Worlds. And the World Between the Worlds is a forest that never ends. It goes on forever, and there are all these beautiful trees, but no animals, nothing like that. And then there are these little tiny pools, little silvery pools about maybe the size of the table that's in front of us, about 4 or 5 feet wide, and you put on the other ring and you jump into a pool and it takes you to a new world. And so they find what ends up becoming Narnia. They go to a few different places, and then they go to this place that is nothing, and they hear this singing begin. And the singing is Aslan singing Narnia into existence. It's this beautiful book, and it's actually one of the least regarded of the Chronicles of Narnia. But for some reason, that book scratches an itch for me every time. So I've read that 4 or 5 times. But I want to return to a few others. I want to return to A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, I've never read that.
I read that in the 3rd grade, and I want to track a copy of that. That is the edition that we actually read in the 3rd grade, which was printed in 1976 or something like that. Still looking for that thing, but finding a book that you can reread is a pretty amazing thing. Convincing yourself to read a book you've already read, I think, is a big ask of yourself.
I have a hard time finishing a book if I'm not into it. Like I've read so many half books and never finished them.
Yeah, I always get a brand new bookmark when I start a book, and so I'll pull something out of the shelf and be like, "Well, I only got 120 pages into this one," and I gave up. I think that reading is something like good for you to instill a love of reading into your kids, because it's tough to get kids. It was tough to get kids in my generation to read because we all of a sudden had, television was 24/7 at that point, and you could watch all sorts of stuff. And then we had video stores, and Take-Two was letting you rent 5 movies for 5 days for only $5. And then video games, and you're just competing with so much more nowadays. And there's great, great books that people read as a kid that their kids can now read. I was watching I was watching the beginning of The Princess Bride the other day.
Ooh, I love that one.
Me too. And it's got that great, Peter Falk does such a great job in that movie as the grandfather. And when he sits down, he goes, my father read this to me, and I read it to your father, and now I'm reading it to you. And I thought to myself, like, well, first of all, my grandfather never visited me when I was sick and read me a book. Like, he was more like, the weather today is nice, isn't it? Yep. But what I would give for that single moment, but the idea of taking a story and passing it down from generation to generation to generation is something pretty neat. And I also love how stories evolve as they go from generation to generation. Jim Henson had a really great series that was short-lived called The Storyteller. I don't know if either of you have seen that.
The first night I ever got drunk was at your apartment, and I watched an episode of that.
Yeah, it's
How old were you?
so good.
It was after high school, so I was 18.
That was the first time you ever got drunk?
Yeah, I was
18?
I was a clean kid in high school. I didn't do anything until after that.
And I don't believe that I was drinking either, because I didn't really drink until I was 21.
Yeah.
Because I was a square. I was a square.
I just remember getting drunk with Dustin and then making nachos and watching the Storytellers.
The Storyteller is all of these old folk tales that they turn into pieces where Jim Henson could create these giant puppets, and it wasn't, the like Muppets that we're used to. It's this giant pieces of puppetry, and they were all sort of trippy and how they were made, kind of like the Labyrinth and Dark Crystal were. And my favorite one is one called The Soldier in Death, which is an old Russian folk tale about a soldier who is walking back from a war, and he's walking thousands of miles home, and he happens upon a guy who is playing this tune, and he gives this guy a dry biscuit, and the guy gives him a better whistle. And so then he stops and whistles and dances with this guy. He gives this guy a biscuit, and all of a sudden now, like, he can dance really well, stops for this last guy, and he's only got one biscuit left, breaks it in half, decides, nope, this guy deserves as much as the other two. And this dude gives him a deck of cards that can't lose, and a sack where if you order something into it, like, that thing will go in. So it's like, hey, ducks, get in this sack, and 3 ducks will fly in. And he ends up capturing death in the sack to save his son from dying. And people start showing up to his home who are just waiting for death, the sweet release of death. And so he goes and releases death from this sack so that
they can't die.
Because they can't
Got
die.
it.
Yep. Nobody is. He goes, there'd be battles waged all day long, and soldiers would just look at each other bloody, but nobody had died. He has this great, he goes, lovers would take themselves to the edge of a cliff and throw themselves over and then have a long climb back up to the top.
It seems weird, though, that if I'm like, God, I'm really hungry, I don't have any money, but I do have this deck of cards that will never lose. Yeah, I'll trade it for a dry biscuit. Like, who are these people that were giving up their magical items?
So this is the thing, is that they're not necessarily like these homeless beggars. They're sort of like another worldly,
They're testing your goodness.
At one point, he uses this deck of cards to play with devils that have taken over this castle. So it's supposed to be otherworldly, a little more fantastic about it.
Does that have any inspiration for...
It's also, by the way, just quickly,
Yeah.
the guy who plays the soldier is Muldoon from Jurassic Park, the gamekeeper. And he is amazing in it.
This is a movie, not a book?
This is a television show, the storyteller.
But is that based... It's based off of...
It's based off of an old Russian folktale that has evolved through so long. All of these things have a meaning behind it that's supposed to teach you a lesson. And this tale has evolved so much that by the time it finally gets turned into a storyteller story, it is drastically different from the first time it was being told hundreds of years ago.
Just made me think of the Ingmar Bergman movie, The Seventh Seal.
Yes.
And so if that was inspired by this Russian fairy tale.
I imagine it would. Well, I've always wondered, was the Seventh Seal inspired by Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey?
Yep, that's how it works.
You guys
movies
excited?
in the future inspire movies in the past.
You guys excited for that third Bill and Ted that they say were promised? Huh?
Were you a Bill and Ted fan?
I did watch Bill and Ted.
Who did you have posters up on your wall when you were a teenage girl?
Oh my God, I still have them.
Yeah?
Yes.
Who was
do.
it? Who'd you have up there?
Like Bot Magazine and all of that. So I remember I had Will Wheaton.
Nice.
Yeah, Katie just went up and she already had a lot of my respect.
There was, of course, the Coreys.
Sure.
Bret Michaels from Poison, of course.
I was assuming another Bret Michaels.
Yeah, the senator.
The other one. Who is that guy? Kirk Cameron and Alyssa Milano. I just wanted to look like her. I remember reading an interview where she was talking about her most comfortable clothes. And it was a point in my life, not unlike many points in my life, where jeans were uncomfortable because I was too fat. And
I own no jeans right now. There's a reason for that.
There's elastic built into all my waistline. So,
and she in this interview had said that it asked her what her most comfortable thing to wear was, and she said jeans because they're just her favorite pair of jeans. And I thought, oh my God, I can't be like Alyssa Milano. I don't wear jeans.
that's the one thing that kept you from being just like Alyssa Milano.
Just the jeans.
Just the jeans.
Everything else was
Jean
very
technology
similar.
has progressed a lot since then.
Yeah, I'm wearing
though.
jeans today.
Nice.
And they're fine.
Would you write Alyssa Milano today and be like, "Dear Alyssa, I finally became comfortable in my jeans. I'd like to tell you about
I
them."
overcame
You
my gene
inspired
phobia.
me.
Do you still talk to Tony Danza? I think they do, by the way.
talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She and Tony Danza. Because he thinks of her like a daughter.
I've heard that.
Isn't that cute?
It's adorable.
Yeah.
Does
Adorable.
he have a
kind of like Full House?
Yeah.
That's true.
Bob Saget and no, I'm just kidding. He's
He's a weirdo.
a weirdo, but he's funny.
He's a dirty dog, but I'm sure he still has a lot of paternal instincts when it comes to maybe the Olsen twins because they were infants when they started
were
that show.
Children, babies.
I don't know. I feel
Just
like
babies.
he's probably frustrated by them because he doesn't get to do the fun parent stuff. He has to do like the like, come on, can't we get the other twin in here? Like, we've done this take 5 times.
He probably didn't make the kind of money that their parents made when
Right.
they were acting.
I love the story about how I can't remember the guy's name who played Mike Brady on the Brady Bunch.
Oh.
I want to say Reed Richards, but that's the
That's
Fantastic
Mr.
Four.
Fantastic.
Google?
Do it. Call Greg. I'm just kidding.
But so when the show was canceled, he contacted the parents of all of the kids and then called Florence Henderson and said, I'd like to take you guys on a trip, on like a vacation. And so he took all of them on an actual vacation. So they took a family trip as like the Bradys.
Wow.
Because he said, I've got a chance to watch all of you grow up all these years, and I love you very much. And
Aw.
I feel like we have become like a family.
Greg watched me grow up, and he has taken me on a trip before, actually. Yes, that does work out that way.
Yeah.
I went to Toronto with Greg and Katie.
Yeah,
It was a lot of fun.
we were like your parents.
You were like my parents.
Did you make sure you got like into the hotel room at the right time? And
I
did
shared
you
a room
knock
with
on
them.
it? Oh,
Yeah.
I've shared a room with Tucker several times. It's been unfortunate almost every single time. And not for the reasons
was
that you
fine.
think. Yeah. He's a mess. He uses all the towels.
Yeah, I sing in my sleep.
It's not, we don't need to get into that. So let's see. Gosh, we've eaten up a lot of your time already, Katie. Let's end with this, okay? So we've touched on a lot of things. We followed it. Did we tell you this thing was going to be full of tangents or what?
Greg told me.
Oh, good.
Tucker didn't tell me anything about what it was
Full
going to be like.
disclosure, right before we started recording, we asked her how many episodes she's listened to, and she said 0.
Zero.
So like most of the people in our lives.
Yeah, this is how we're building an audience. We're just
Yeah.
inviting people to be on
Yes.
so that they'll at least download their episode.
Right. So you're saying I'm not important. You just want me for my.
Yeah, the
to
audience that
download?
you bring, the audience you bring with us. Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
all this
All right.
is for.
Yeah, I mean,
I get it.
good. Okay, so we don't have to put on any airs anymore after this.
Right.
In that case, our Patreon is so if you could pick one Corey movie
Oh,
to watch over and over and over again, which one would it be? It's a tough decision.
it is hard because Dream a Little Dream is really great,
Good.
but I also love the vampire movie that I can't remember the name
Lost
of.
Boys.
Lost Boys.
Yes.
But I'm too scared to watch it, or I was when I was a kid. So I've watched it when I was older and love it and have the nostalgia of it for when I was a kid when I was hiding behind the couch trying to watch it. So I'm gonna have to say Dream a Little Dream.
I like it. I was waiting for you to be like Lost Boys final answer, but you stayed with Dream a Little Dream.
Yeah.
I like that. So if you could, if someone's never seen Dream a Little Dream, just sum it up for them here. Give a pitch for it.
Oh, okay. Well, 2 people collide and their bodies switch into old people, or vice. They're
It was a very popular trope in the 80s. Like Father, Like Son is another one that's very similar.
Sure. Yes. And Corey Feldman does a Michael Jackson dance on the bleachers. The end.
Is Corey Feldman your favorite?
He's my favorite now. He is so weird.
Yeah, right. His
He
Today
does
Show
his little
appearances.
weird, like, doesn't he ride on a hoverboard? And
When he's got his angels, he pays female models to live with him and dress in like skimpy lingerie and wear angel wings.
that's
So he's surrounded by women who are dressed like that all the time, and then they're also the members of his band.
very weird.
But really, like when you
Corey's
had a
Angels.
life like his, were you expecting to get out unscathed? Probably not.
Probably not.
No. Do you know he offered to play himself in a movie about the Coreys, and they were like, no, thank you.
Of course he
no,
did.
we don't.
Yes.
We're good. He's like, please, they didn't want me to voice Donatello. Actually, he's voicing Donatello again in something. Someone
is?
told me. Yeah.
Really? I'll have
Yeah.
to dive into that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what that would be.
So, I mean, why not, right? Katie, thank you very much for being
Thank
our
you.
guest today. And if people, are you on the Twitter or anything like
The
that?
tweets? No.
Yeah. No.
I'm not on the Twitter.
Are you on Facebooks?
I'm on the Facebooks
Yeah.
and the Instagrams. I just started doing the Instagrams.
That's exciting.
Yeah. I figured, I got to get with the times.
So what are you? Is it mostly food photos? Like that's what my Instagram is, mostly food.
I don't know. I've only posted like 5 pictures on Instagram.
What was your last one?
It was pictures of my trip to Colorado, Longmont and Boulder.
Lovely.
Yes.
Also, I don't know why I didn't say this earlier, but Red Rocks is probably the coolest place to see a concert in the country.
Oh
Don't
my
you
God.
think so?
It is the best.
It's the bomb.
It is the
diggity.
best. When I was pregnant with Forrest, I saw Mana Chao at Red Rocks, and it was the first concert that Forrest ever went to.
Yes.
And he was pretty great.
Dave Matthews at Red Rocks is pretty great too. And we'll end it right
Dave
there.
Matthews dumps his tour bus waste onto
What?
First of all,
people.
what?
On a
He
boat.
doesn't do that.
Wait, hold
it was
on.
a mechanical failure. There was an architectural tour on the Chicago River, and they were going over the Michigan Avenue Bridge, and they dumped the toilet from his bus, and it landed on a bunch of tourists.
Well, if you're gonna get shit on it, might as well be Dave Matthews'
It's
shit.
not like Dave is up there being like, "Let's pull this thing, man." If anything, it was Boyd Tinsley who was doing that.
And scene.
JJ Meets World.
Well, folks, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for taking this ride with us. I'd like to remind you of a couple things. Number one, you can subscribe to JJ Meets World on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you're consuming the podcast that you love, and take the time to go back and listen to some of the old episodes. Even if you've heard it once before, share it with your friends. If you could Facebook or tweet about us, gosh, that makes a big difference, whether you like us or not. If you do like us, a review is also a great way to show us some love. Speaking of showing love, patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld. I'm not going to give you a big, long spiel. Please, please, please just give us a little bit of money. Everything costs so much. Patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld. Over 60 hours of original content, all for free on the internet. And the only way we can keep that thing going is if you folks give us a couple of your dimes, a nickel, a penny. Not the pennies so much, but okay, I'll take the pennies. Speaking of pennies, he does all of his shopping at JC Penney's. My producer, Tucker Lucas, you can find him on the interwebs at moonbasemaria.com. It's definitely one of those video wormholes. You'll get stuck on there for several hours. Don't look at it while your boss is watching, though. There's some weird stuff on there that may cost you that big promotion. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, me, JJ Gordon, go to linebenders.com. Currently accepting people who want the Linebenders to come to their holiday party. If you've got an employee gathering, a group holiday party, a family reunion, we're great to perform at those things, and we're very, very funny in person and also funny looking. So, jjmeetsworld.com. It's also a great place to go and check out previous episodes. Episode 50 is right around the corner, and we hope that you'll come along for that journey as well. And as I've been using the word Journey a lot lately, and I just realized I don't own a single Journey album.